Hello and welcome to the Buy, Refurbish, Rent and Refinance Calculator tutorial. I built it 9 years ago and it is one that I've used over 550 times to find the first flurry of high yielding income producing assets, which is what it's probably best for. This could be from HMOs to service accommodation, short lets, social housing, mixed use freeholds. So let's dive into it straight and I can give you a quick whistle stop tour of how to use it. Always start with the end in mind. So the GDV is and the rental income is what you need to be programming in here. Anything that's in blue you can program. Anything in black it's all locked, so you don't change anything that doesn't need to be changed. So ultimately, once you've spoken to your architect, you've sketched out the plan that you want, that you know you're going to get, then you put it into here. So the retail, simple, flat 1, flat 2. This could be HMO rooms, one room at a time. I do that normally. I do a summary, so I'll do, if I just did an 8 bed, 8 bath, so I'll do 8 1 beds, and then I'll put the summary of the size of the house, so it was about 1,700 square foot, and I'll put the GDV of the house, so it's 500,000, but then I'll spread out the rental income for each of them, because that's kind of how I was renting it out by the room. But yeah, this is just another example of a deal. £900,000 of GDV, 6.7 on average. So this is the summary here at the bottom, average yield, but you can see the retail units at the top that I've put here are at 10%, £15 a square foot rental income. So it's pretty detailed, and this is the kind of stuff that you need to send to funders anyway. That's the reason why I made it. Once that's done, then you've got to put in the loan term. So typically I just do everything at 12 months. You might be able to do stuff at 6 months, 9 months, and there is a toggle here which you can change to 6 and 9 months, etc. But I tend to just keep it at 12 for the most part, because most deals will take that amount of time in the grand scheme of things. If you can do it faster, of course, you'll boost your returns. But always try and look at the worst case scenario and get comfortable with that is the philosophy. Put the address in the top here. I did over 550 of these. So by knowing the name, when you refer back to it, you save each one on file in each folder. That's how I did it, and went back to each opportunity, because I was doing follow-ups as well. If there was changes in like there's just been the stamp duty changed from 3 to 5% surcharge, I would go back to some old deals and have to tweak them, and that's important. Type of deals, HMOs, it's mixed use freehold, etc. So then you've got the date inquired. I mean, these are just little details that I always put in, because ultimately when you're going back and you're doing so many deal reviews, that it's good to know when you last offered on something. I've got something else which is called a sourcing offer system, but that's for another video. Okay, so this particular calculator calculates both the refurbishment and bridging loan offerings. So if you're going down the bridging facility, typically they'll give you up to 75% of the purchase price. Yes, there are some that go at 80% net and a whole bunch in between. But ultimately 75% gross loan to value on the purchase, and then you self-fund the refurb. Or you can do a refurbishment facility, which will give you 100% of the refurb cost and up to 75% of the purchase price. So that's all well and good. Right, so with this, once you have the total square footage that you're building, then you put in your build cost. Just before, I was jumping ahead there. Purchase price, self-explanatory. Asking price, self-explanatory. I always put the asking price in there, because you might sometimes bid over, sometimes bid below, and then you can stress test where the number is. Typically as well, I'm always looking at, if I'm close to the asking price, obviously that's a lot easier to expectation for getting a deal accepted. If you're over 10%, chances are slim, but not impossible. Certainly if you're over 20%, it's very, very challenging. So I always put it in there to give myself a little bit of a guide of how realistic is this when I'm pushing that purchase price down and down and down, thinking, am I going to waste loads of time trying to convince the seller to sell to me, or are we a million miles away? Before we continue, a quick word from our sponsors, Merryoaks Property Finance. Merryoaks Property Finance is my finance brokerage, and I've been in property for 25 years. I started Merryoaks Property Finance in 2021, and we support investors and developers just like you, just like me, across the country with all of their funding requirements. So if it's bridging finance, development finance, commercial, buy to let, multi-unit freehold blocks, VAT bridging, HMOs, hotels, industrial, the whole 9 yards, we can support you with that. Please reach out if you have a funding requirement, you need support with it, you want to speak to one of our experts, you want to speak to me directly, please reach out, let us know, and I look forward to speaking with you soon. Now, back to the video. Anyway, once you've got that, then we go into the build cost. Then the build cost here is 300,000. That's the number that I've got in there, which is £86 a square foot. Now, for a refurb, that's probably a little bit light unless you're doing everything yourself, in terms of the trades and your project managing it, etc. For 350 pounds a square foot, let's put it in at 350. That's about £100 a square foot. Probably more realistic. Could be even higher. Build costs have been going up over the last 2 years. So let's leave that there. 10% contingency. Always leave a bit of contingency in there. And then you jump into the finance costs. So once you're in the finance costs, then you've got whether you're toggled on bridging or development, that starts to become important. So we've got it on bridging, it's 2%. If you're on the refurb facility, 2% will pop up there. Then you've got your survey, valuation costs, your interest, whether it's retained or serviced. So if it's serviced, it's going to be a little bit less, but if it's retained, usually they compound the interest, so that's how this calculator works. And then you've got your broker fee as well. Different brokers charge different things. Some of them charge 1%. We charge a fixed 695 for all of our loans, or 1250 for development and refurbishment. Then you go down here if you've got any HMO licenses. So the example that we've got here doesn't have any HMO license requirements. And you've got solicitors fees. Sometimes if I've got planning costs, I'll use one of these tabs, one of these cells to put some planning costs in, architecture fees, etc. Any professional fees. But that is that up until that point. Then you've got to get into the debt metrics. So then we go, what's the interest rate? I've just put 12%, 1% a month, could be 0.8 a month, could be 0.79, 0.66, a month. Ultimately, it has to be the annual interest rate. 12% I've got in this example, 75% LTV. And then that tells me when I hit update model, what is the net loan amount. So you can see here is the gross loan amount against the purchase price. It rolls up, calculates, it's got a cash flow forecast where it accurately calculates the interest accrued and the arrangement fees, and then it deducts it from the gross loan amount to give you your net loan amount. So that's all well and good. Once you've got that, then you jump down into this box here and you look at the deposit, which is going to be your acquisition facility less, your purchase price less your acquisition facility. That becomes the deposit you need to put in. Then you've got your stamp duty. So this is non-residential. If it was residential, you click that. Non-residential is saying 7,000. Refurb facility is 385. So you're self-funding the work. So this is quite heavy on your equity pot. Then you got your finance costs, which are these clumped together, and your transaction costs. So then what you do is you hit update model again, and it tells you 519,490 is how much cash you need to come up with to do this deal. Now this deal is not a bad deal because it's £900,000 of GDV versus 801,000 of total cost. So it calculates your total cost and tells you how much money you're going to make either on your balance sheet or if you were to sell it. There's some other additional costs if you were going to sell it, like staging or estate agency or or legal costs, etc. But if you're refinancing it, which is what the idea of this, but it's a good gauge actually. Just I do always look at that, say, right, am I going to make a net profit, or am I going to be on my balance sheet, or am I going to be making a loss on my balance sheet? Am I going to be in negative equity? So once you've got to that point, then we look, okay, down the list. Okay, we've got a 6% rate for the exit and the refinance. I've got a 2% arrangement fee. I've got some solicitors fees. I've got another broker fee because I'm doing another loan. £900,000 of GDV, 75% LTV. Again, you can change this, flex it up and down because you might not be able to get 65 because it's next to a pub or something. So the lenders are all going to cap it at 65. You can play around and stress test all these numbers as much as you want. And I have spent a lot of time stress testing all of the projects over those 550 that I did. Once you've got 75% of the £900,000, it's 675 is the remortgage amount that you're going to get in. Your release funds are about 412,000, so you're going to leave 128,000 pound in the deal. You're going to make a 7% return on your capital employed, and it's going to give you 725 pounds a month cash flow. Now you've also got monthly running costs to consider before you get too excited about this. If it's an HMO, you might have to fill this all out and get a little bit more accurate. But because it's the mixed use freehold and single let example, you don't necessarily have that. But if you wanted me to make another video, which is a little bit longer, I can go through all the HMO stuff as well, but it's fairly straightforward. So with that in mind, happy days, you've got a return. You know, some people think, oh, well, that's not a return, I want 20%, etc. Well, you know, then maybe you shouldn't be paying $350 for it. Maybe you should be paying closer to $300 for it. And you think, okay, well, that actually is starting to look a little bit better. You click update model. I've got to still put in quite a bit of cash, but actually I'm going to leave in a lot less at the end, and that's starting to look attractive. And actually I am going to build it myself. I am going to project manage it, so I am actually going to be able to build it at 300,000 plus 10% contingency. And now suddenly it's all just jumped up massively to 55%, which is really, really, really good. So if that was the case, you might think, well, that's definitely a deal that I would love to do. I'm pulling out most of my cash. I'm closer to 688 as a total project cost on a £900,000 development. I'm going to make a bunch of cash on my cash flow. I'm going to pull out most of my capital. This is a deal that I could really get behind. You saved £100,000 on your costs, which is great. But then you think, okay, you know what, actually, though, I don't have £444,000 to put in, so why don't I flick it to a refurbishment facility? At this point, I can get 65% LTGDV. Sometimes you can get 70, sometimes you can get 75%. Again, you can stress test all these. You got 2% arrangement fee. Bear in mind over here, you might have to bump this up depending on the well, that'd be a good price to get it for. Depending on the broker that you're using. Hope you're using a good broker. But then you can see here the 585 and the is the total loan amount, because you're going to be borrowing 65% against the 900, which is 585. It calculates all of your interest and arrangement fees. It gives you 100% of the build facility that you need, and then whatever's left over of the 585 after these two deductions is the net day one amount. So suddenly your actual contribution from 444,000, 500,000 is dropped right all the way down to £112,000. So that £112,000 is great, because your total return is now 20%, and you could maybe do 2 of these deals, or 3 of these deals, or 4 of these deals. And if you can do 4 of these deals at the same time at 20% returns, with the same £400,000 that you started with, you could be in the same period suddenly making 4 lots of £725 a month. And that's the power of leverage. That's the beauty of leverage. Of course, your costs might go up a little bit here and there because you're borrowing more money, but that is going to be the beauty of the point here. So hopefully all that makes sense. And if you've got any other questions, let me know. Otherwise, happy hunting, and hope to see you again soon. Cheers.